If you're looking for an adventure for the we like the Jeep level members of the family, this little Great Salt Lake excursion is just the ticket. You get to drive your Jeep, and the less enthusiastic off-roaders can still come and enjoy a day in the Jeep without experiencing off-camber survival angst. We did the whole trail in 2 high, so this is definitely not a test your mettle 4 low crawl. There are a plethora of roads around the lake, and Google has them all mapped out, pretty well. Just plan a route and download it in case you lose service. And have a full tank of gas and maybe even throw in a gas can. It's lonely out there. Welcome to the Great Salt Lake, number 10 on the list of the highest salt content bodies of water on Earth. The ocean rolls with a 3.5% salinity, but this 75-mile long and 35-mile wide beauty is rocking between 5 and 27% salinity. So depending on the lake's level, that can change the shoreline as much as 15 miles. Yeah, it's shallow, so it changes a lot. If we listen to our very positive and accurate news media, it sounds like the Great Salt Lake is about to dry up and blow away.
This is one of Utah's most unique natural treasures. The Great Salt Lake, also known as America's Dead Sea. Spanning an area nearly the size of Delaware, it's the biggest salt lake in the Western Hemisphere. The Great Salt Lake could soon be no more. Today, about half of the lake's surface, nearly 750 square miles, roughly the size of Maui, is dry.
We thought we'd better take a look before its total demise. Where did this lake come from, you ask? This supersaturated salt solution is the residual sediment and surviving bathtub ring from the massive Lake Bonneville that covered most of the state of Utah in days of yore. The lake's history goes way back to the early 1700s. The old school maps would leave unexplored areas blank, and those unknown sections were like catnip to the fertile minds of those reading the maps. One rumor started that there was a large Dead Sea west of the Mississippi. That rumor is traced back to the Lord Lieutenant of the French colony at Newfoundland. Lord Baron La Houdin was one of the most widely read authors in North America in the first half of the 18th century. And he also fancied himself to be quite the explorer. He claimed that while out west, he discovered a group of natives called the Tahuglukak. They had European-looking slaves that he called the Mozimlak. The enslaved natives gave the Baron the description of their homeland that included cities and villages surrounding a large salt lake with a large river feeding in from the mountains. Now, he cranked out a couple of maps of the lake and surrounding areas based on the description he got from these natives, but he never actually laid eyes on the lake. The map he drew opened up the possibility of a river that would provide a route from the Pacific Ocean to the Great Lakes region. They even had a name for it, the River of the West. But it was that mysterious outlet river from the Salt Lake that would confuse explorers for decades to come. It wouldn't matter who eventually reigned over the New World, and France, England, and Spain were all in the mix. A mighty river to the west coast would be beyond useful, a trade route that would be invaluable. So they kept it on the maps. It just had to be there, right? Well, in 1776, a couple of Franciscan missionaries by the name of Escalante and Dominguez were trying to find a route to California. Oddly enough, it was known as the Dominguez-Escalante Expedition. When they reached the Utah Lake area, they befriended the locals. And they were informed by the Indians that there was a much larger lake to the north that was extremely salty. And they said, anyone getting part of his body wet instantly feels severe itching around the wet part. Yeah, they're not wrong. What's important here is that when they made their map of the area, they were careful to include a river exiting the Salt Lake and running to the coast. Everyone really seemed to want that river. Nobody wanted wanted the river more than Thomas Jefferson, especially after he finalized the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. I never really thought of Jefferson as a land magnate, but he did pull off the biggest deal of all time. When he looked at all the maps available at the time and saw that every map had a river heading to the coast, he probably thought, hello to the most powerful trade route on the globe. His slam dunk purchase was going to be just that much better. Now all he had to do was find that river. That was a job for Lewis and Clark, and he sent them out to find it. They would reach the Pacific, but they never did find that river. For the next 20 years, the make-believe river would flow in the imagination of politicians, businessmen, and the mountain men that did their bidding. This part of the story requires a quick trip to Wyoming, to Teton County, where the most famous mountain man that ever lived called home. Jim Bridger was the man that knew the area west of the Mississippi better than any other. A well-known trapper, explorer, and mountain man extraordinaire. The town of Fort Bridger is now a monument to this amazing man and his accomplishments. Jim Bridger and his influence on the lake is worth taking a look at. The story goes that in 1824, our man Jim was with some of his trapper buddies and they were contemplating the Bear River's path while in Idaho. It turned out that no one knew where the river ended up. Wait, something that needed exploring? Jim immediately built himself a bullboat. A round frame of branches wrapped in buffalo hide. I guess it kept him dry, but trying to row a round boat had to be interesting. Now, no one knows for sure if he was alone as he paddled and spun his way down the river or even how long it took. But somehow he made it to the end of the river where it emptied into a giant body of water. When he dipped his hand into the water for a drink, the salt water was a total surprise. He told everyone that he had reached the Pacific Ocean, and why not? Huge body of water, salty, it had to be. He drew some good maps of the trip and especially the area near the lake. Those maps would be a tremendous help to future travelers, including the Mormon pioneers. Okay, so the Great Salt Lake had finally been seen and even visited, but there was still the question of an outlet to the Pacific Ocean. A river had to go to the ocean, otherwise how could it be salty, right? There was still a burning desire from all concerned to find and make this mystical river a reality. The fur trade alone would benefit astronomically. Just driving around the lake in a great riding Jeep seemed like it takes forever, and we were only driving down one side of the lake. But how far would the American fur traders go to prove the theory that the Great Salt Lake had an outlet to the ocean? How about getting in a few of those round bullboats and paddling and spinning around the entire Great Salt Lake? In 1826, 4 mountain men led by James Clyman did just that. How did they even carry enough food and water? These guys were amazing. 24 days later, they came back with no outlet river found. But a possibility of where it once might have been, or was thought to have been found. Now, hope springs eternal, and the potential for an easy trail to the coast lived on. The information provided by these mountain men was so valuable to the pioneers that the This Is the Place monument that's overlooking Salt Lake honors them still today. President Polk just knew there had to be a river leading out of the Salt Lake to the Pacific Ocean, and all the eyewitness accounts made no difference. He had seen the old maps drawn by explorers that had never actually seen the lake, and he knew it had to be there. Manifest destiny. It was a big deal at the time. It was the belief that the expansion of the U.S. through the American continent was both justified and inevitable. God must have provided an easy way out west. Once an idea takes hold, it's very hard to change the mind of the believers, with mere facts. Well, at least that one hasn't changed today. John Fremont was also a huge believer in the manifest destiny, and he, along with the famous explorer Kit Carson and 30 other men, also searched the area. They too tried and failed at finding an easy path to California, but their maps were a tremendous help to future migrants. But still, they held on to the possibilities of an easy path through the West. Jeepers often take a page from the wagon trains of yesteryear and travel in groups. Maybe for different reasons, but we all seem to like the support of a group. The wagon trains heading west were becoming more common, and the mammoth Independent Rock in Wyoming became a well-known place to document one's passing. But there had to be a better way to the coast, a shortcut. Enter Lance Hastings, a 27-year-old lawyer with just a touch of megalomania. He wanted to get the settlers to California, then rule over them as governor. While traveling to California to meet Fremont to get his views on what was the easiest route west, Fremont confirmed that Hastings was on the right track. With that boost from the famous Fremont, he put together a booklet called An Immigrant's Guide to Oregon and California. Now, why would we bring this up in a Great Salt Lake video? Well, because of the impressively awesome shortcut he mapped out in his little book. A shortcut so amazing that no one had ever seen it, including him. That shortcut just so happened to lead right past the Great Salt Lake and across the 80 miles of sweltering salt flats around the lake. What could go wrong? The American dream turned into a nightmare for one group of Hastings believers known as the Donner Party. That's right, the Donner Party got to know the Great Salt Lake up close and personal. Now, my experience with shortcuts is probably similar to yours and theirs. The Donner's first of many mistakes was to take the, quote, shorter route down the bush and tree-filled Immigration Canyon into the Salt Lake Valley, instead of the standard Weber Canyon route. That took a good month to cut their way through, and they lost some valuable time. Hastings had walked some of the salt flats, but it never really crossed his mind that the salt flats wouldn't support a wagon. The perception that the salt flats were dry seems logical, but the mushy salt bog just below the surface is an impassable joke. Just ask any one of the best of today's four-wheel drive vehicles that have met their match in the mushy mess, as is evidenced by the multiple tracks of shame in the mushy salt off to the sides of I-80. The salt flats are a logistical nightmare, and there was no way they could be crossed in the 2 days and 2 nights like the note left by Hastings promised the Donners. The reality was a 5-day trip with the loss of wagons and oxen due to lack of water. But by now they were committed. Turning back wasn't even an option. The same can be true even today.
Get out, Jace!
Case in point, the mighty Merc and its load of seasoned travelers that we nearly plowed into around a corner on a turn.
You guys are unbelievable.
As their car was down for the count in the middle of the road, in the middle of nowhere. They were on their way to Idaho via Nevada. Yeah, don't put total faith in your GPS.
Why are you lowering it? That's tiring it, James. Stop!
This desert-ready ride was brought to its knees by a flat tire.
It's the least of our worries.
I need it.
You don't need it. You don't need the reel.
Nothing here. It must
your
be on
spare,
the
right?
inside.
The wheels.
And who carries a bulky spare? In true cheaper fashion, we attempted to help.
What we're going to do is make a tire plug out of this duct tape. Insert it with this screwdriver. Drive to safety. Yeah, it's not going to work. But hey, what else we got?
My car home, that I had a card to get a tire, or whatever. If they could have brought me a tire, I could have paid
We
for
got
one.
this screwdriver that's going to jab it in there. What it's going to require, though, is I'm going to have to hack up a big one right in the middle of that just to lube it up a little.
Like a lug?
That's going to be a little bit offensive.
Okay, I won't film that. I'm not really doing that.
Waste the water.
Yeah, you got to get it wet. Right like that.
Oh, I actually gagged. I actually
I
gagged.
told you it was going to be rough.
Stop for once. Can you listen to me for once? Your own mother asked you to stop, though.
Okay, that's our first gob of tape.
So rude.
It's all nicely inserted.
What makes you so happy making people miserable?
Well, that was a total fail, but we tried, and isn't that what's important?
Here they come. Yep.
Leaving the kind young mother and her sweet children in the care of one of Utah's finest, we continued our journey. So very, very thankful for our law enforcement officers. Whatever they get paid, it's not enough. Seeing people frolicking on the salt flats today is a long way from the scene of some serious hardships for the Donner Party as they took that shortcut to the coast. Today we take our Jeeps through the same mountains, maybe with a little less snow, and never realize the unbelievable hardships of those that went before us. Today we hop in a Jeep, pull off the top, and drive the trail, enjoying every second of it. Then stop at the springs, and we do it all for fun. Without the monuments, the hardships of those that first broke trail could be forgotten. That 20-foot base where the Donners are standing, yeah, that was the 20-foot snow depth at the time. No wonder there was nothing to eat. Some 22 years after the Donners left Utah, Manifest Destiny became a reality. It was just done with wagon trains and rails instead of a river. Today on the north end of the lake, the Golden Spike Monument celebrates the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad, the joining of the Union and Central Pacific tracks in 1869. This is worth seeing. The beautifully restored trains belching smoke are a sight to behold. This was a major milestone in our country's history, a coast-to-coast rail system. Let the expansion begin. With the flood of migration to the area, the need for recreation was growing. And the lake was not without its attempts to make it a resort destination. The first attempt was the Garfield Beach Resort in 1875, named after the president of the time. Next up was the first Saldair, and it took a bite out of Garfield's business, which closed, then burned to the ground, well, to the lake, in 1904. It's tough to predict the lake's level, and the first Saldair resort was stranded a half a mile from the water during the drought in 1931. There was a half-hearted attempt to get it going again and turn a profit after the war, but attempts to generate cash were never as successful as the fire that destroyed it in 1970. But wait, there was another pavilion built near the original Saldair in 1981, just in time for the highest lake levels in decades. The dance floor was under 5 feet of nasty salt water, but alas, that one still survives today. Speaking of high water, with the news media, it's one extreme or another. Today it's drought and climate change, and in the 80s it was flood and climate change. The lake is an unpredictable monster. Back in the 80s, the water level of the lake was so high that it was causing serious property damage. Governor Bangerter made the call to build a pumping station that would transfer some of the excess salt-infested liquid out into a dry lake bed, where evaporation could work its magic. In 1987, the pumps went live with a $60 million price tag. But to be fair, the $260 million in property damage due to the floodwaters justified the cost. The pumps are a marvel of engineering, and they ran for a full 26 months, dropping the lake level by a whopping 18 inches. Well, you know, it's a big lake. But when you consider that the lake has dropped over 18 feet since then, I guess it's not that impressive. This is a weird fact. Sometimes the pumps were reversed to maintain the lake's level. Who knew? It's interesting that we all think we can predict and even control Mother Nature. The lake levels are ever changing, and man's battle with the lake hasn't gone all that well. The pumps are still intact and ready to suck. Well, with a quick 6 months refurb, they would be. You know, should they ever need to be used again, which is not likely, but the $10,000 a year we spend to keep the pumps ready for action is viewed as a good insurance policy by some and a total waste of tax dollars by others. Hey, what do I know? Wait a second. Is that river exiting the lake on its way to the coast? Oh, I think TeraFlex just discovered the River of the West. I'm Dennis at TeraFlex. Thanks for watching.